A man is hunted down in the pouring rain of Chicago, survived only by a blind child touching his shoulder in the darkness. 15 years later, that man has become the most notorious mafia boss on the East Coast. And that blind child, now a 28-year-old pianist, accidentally stumbles into his own lockdown hotel during an equally dark storm. Only this time, she's no longer a frightened child. She's here to burn everything to the ground, including him. Which city are you watching from? Please like and comment your city name below to let me know how far this story has come. And don't leave, because this is just the beginning. The rain came down like the city owed it something. Not the polite October drizzle that Chicagoans complained about over coffee and morning radio. This was something older, something with a grudge. By 8 in the evening, the streets of the Loop had turned into shallow rivers choked with fast food wrappers and cigarette butts. And the gutters were screaming the way gutters scream when the infrastructure underneath them has been underfunded for 30 years and nobody cares enough to fix it. Thunder moved through the buildings in long, rolling waves, shaking glass, rattling window frames, rattling the fillings in the back teeth of anyone dumb enough to be outside. Eleanor Vale was outside. She moved the way water moves, not fighting the terrain but reading it, adjusting to every shift before most people would even notice the shift was coming. Her carbon fiber cane swept left and right in short, controlled arcs, not frantically, not desperately, but with the quiet efficiency of someone who had been navigating by sound and pressure and memory since the age of 13. The cane clicked off a fire hydrant. She corrected 2 degrees left. Clicked off a mailbox edge. Corrected again. Her free hand gripped the strap of a weathered leather satchel against her right side. The satchel stuffed with sheet music and a miniature keyboard synthesizer and 3 ballpoint pens she kept forgetting to replace when they ran dry. Her shoes were soaked through. Had been soaked through since she got off the train at Washington/Wabash 30 minutes ago, and the moment her feet touched the platform, the sky had opened up like God was personally irritated with her schedule. She didn't have a destination. That was the problem. The recital hall on Michigan Avenue had locked its doors early because of the storm. The studio manager, a nervous little man named Petrov who smelled of medicated shampoo and always typed in all caps, had sent her a voicemail at 7:43. Eleanor. Very sorry. Storm, too bad, building closing early. Reschedule Monday. 3 sentences. 0 punctuation. She had listened to the message twice in the stairwell of the train station while rain hammered the iron lattice above her head and dripped through in thin silver threads. Monday. She had rent due Friday. The session work she picked up kept her alive, barely, grudgingly, in the specific way that barely alive means you're making choices between medication and groceries and pretending you're fine when acquaintances ask how things are going. She played backup piano for recording studios, coached the occasional private student, performed at hotel lobbies on weekends when they'd have her. It wasn't glamour. It was survival arranged into a weekly schedule. She needed tonight's session fee. So she walked. Because there was a secondary studio on South Wabash, run by a woman named Donna Chen, who kept irregular hours and occasionally let Eleanor record late if the booking calendar was clear, and Eleanor had maybe a 15% chance that Donna was still there, and maybe a 30% chance she'd let Eleanor record anything useful in this weather when even the microphones would be picking up thunder, but 30% was better than 0, and 0 was what she had right now. So she walked. The sirens started maybe 6 blocks north. 1 first, then 3. Then a sound she couldn't immediately classify. Not police, not ambulance. Shorter bursts, a private frequency. And beneath that, faint but distinct, the low mechanical churn of large vehicle engines moving fast and close together. A convoy. At least 4 vehicles running tight formation, which you only did when you were transporting something or someone you couldn't afford to lose. Eleanor stopped at the corner of Madison and Wabash and tilted her head. She had learned early that the city communicated in layers. The surface layer was what sighted people navigated by. Signs, faces, traffic lights, the visual grammar of 1,000 small cues. Below that was the acoustic layer, and that one she had mapped more completely than most people mapped their own neighborhoods. The way sound bent around the old stone buildings on Wacker Drive versus the glass towers further east. The way foot traffic patterns changed 3 blocks from any major transit hub, the specific resonance of water hitting steel drainage grates as opposed to concrete curbs. Tonight, the city's acoustic layer was telling her something was wrong. The convoys were headed east, the sirens were scattering, not converging on a single location the way they did for accidents or fires, but dispersing, as if whatever was happening was too fluid and fast-moving for a standard emergency response. Somewhere to her northeast, she heard glass break. 2 quick pops that weren't thunder, then nothing. Then 3 more pops in rapid succession further away, then the long ascending howl of at least one vehicle accelerating hard enough to push the engine. Gunshots. She knew what gunshots sounded like. She had known since she was 10 years old, crouched in a basement in New Orleans with a stranger's blood on her hands and a storm so bad it made this Chicago rain look like a summer afternoon, listening to the world fall apart above her. Eleanor turned away from the direction of the sirens and kept moving south. The warmth found her 2 blocks later. It was faint, buried under the rain smell and exhaust and wet concrete, but it was real. Piano music, live, not recorded. The acoustic signature was completely different from a speaker signal. Speakers flatten frequencies at the edges. Live piano has this quality of space around it, resonance that spreads from the source outward, and she could feel it against the skin of her face as much as hear it. Rich left-hand chords, old-school stride voicing, slightly rushed in the lower register, which meant either the pianist was nervous or the song was written to sound that way. She followed it. The building materialized through the rain as a wall of warmth and faint golden light. Stone facade, wide. She swept the cane across the bottom of a set of steps, 4 risers, broad, marble from the sound of it, then found the door by its draft. Heavy brass handle, cold against her palm. She pushed through into a revolving door, shuffled forward, and stepped out of the storm. The lobby of the Blackthorn House Hotel wrapped around her like something remembered from a dream. The warmth hit first, radiating heat, dry and dense, the kind that comes from actual cast iron radiators rather than forced air systems. Then the smell, old wood, stone, something floral and chemical like fresh-cut flowers in chlorinated water, and underneath everything a faint copper note she didn't immediately place. Then the sound. The piano was close. 15, maybe 20 feet ahead and to her left. A grand from the resonance. Steinway, probably, given the depth of the sustain. But the pianist had stopped. Everything had stopped. That was the thing she noticed a half-second after stepping fully inside. The absence. A hotel lobby should never be this quiet. There should be voices, footsteps, the background percussion of luggage wheels on marble, and ice clicking in glasses and elevator bells. Instead, she got nothing. A kind of pressurized silence, like the moment before a pressure seal breaks. She took 3 steps forward. Her cane clicked across marble once, twice, and she walked directly into something large and solid and human. She registered it in order, the impact against her shoulder and chest, her satchel spinning on its strap, her cane skidding sideways out of her grip, and making that horrible clattering sound across hard floor that always sent a spike of cold through her sternum. Then hands. Large, immediately gripping both her upper arms, steadying her before she could fall, with a speed and control that didn't feel like reflex. It felt practiced, the grip of someone used to assessing threats before responding to them. She smelled blood, fresh, close, the copper note she'd caught underneath everything else. It was coming from him. Whoever he was bleeding. The scent was strong enough now that she could roughly place the wound somewhere high on his body, chest or shoulder. His breathing was even but slightly shallow, controlled in the way people control their breathing when controlling it is the only thing keeping them functional. "Let go," she said. He didn't. Around her she heard movement. Multiple people, sudden and sharp, the way furniture gets displaced when everyone in a room stands up at once. Metal sounds, precise, brief, the specific sound of slide action on semi-automatic handguns being racked or safeties being disengaged. She had never owned a firearm in her life, and she could identify that sound from 100 yards away. She counted at minimum 6, probably more. The hands on her arms tightened by a fraction. "Who are you?" the man said. not a question. The inflection was completely flat, declarative, the kind of construction people used when they didn't actually want information, when what they wanted was your reaction to being asked. She didn't flinch. I'm someone whose cane is on the floor. Let go of me. Silence. 3 seconds of it, which was long enough that she started cataloging exits. The door she'd come through, revolving, slow to move, bad option. The elevator bank she could roughly triangulate from the mechanical hum. But elevator banks meant corners, blind spots, no escape route. There would be a service corridor somewhere, probably behind the check-in desk. Probably... You came in alone, the man said. Yes. Why? Because it's raining. Another pause, shorter. Bring her a chair, he said. Not to her, to the room. She felt motion nearby and immediately stepped back. I don't want a chair, I want my cane. Someone get her cane, he said. She heard footsteps approach at an angle, heard the cane picked up from the floor, and then someone, a younger voice, carefully neutral, trained neutral, the kind of neutral that takes effort, said, Ma'am, and extended it toward her. She found it with her free hand and took it. Thank you, she said. Then to the man still in front of her, I'm going to leave now. No. She went very still. The building is locked down, he said. No one enters. No one leaves. You should not be here. I wasn't trying to be here. I was trying to find shelter from... That's not what I said. His voice was low, not loud the way intimidation is usually performed, not leaning into volume or aggression, quiet in the way that a very deep hole is quiet. The sound fell into itself and didn't come back. She had encountered that quality in exactly one other person in her life, a man who taught private security consultation at the university extension where her father had once taken a class, and that man had told her that the quietest people in any room were either the most bored or the most dangerous. This man was not bored. She felt her pulse in her throat. Your hand, she said. You're bleeding through your coat. Silence. Left side, probably shoulder joint or just below clavicle, she continued. You're favoring the left. Your grip on my arm was mostly right hand. If it's a through and through, you're in less trouble than if it's still inside you, but either way you need pressure on it or you're going to get lightheaded. And given whatever is apparently happening right now, I'm guessing you'd prefer not to get lightheaded. Another silence, longer. Then from somewhere to her right, a different voice. Older, smoother, with faint accent she couldn't immediately place, continental European perhaps, said, Mr. Moreau. Just the name. A warning inflection. She filed the name. The man in front of her exhaled once through his nose. Sit down, he said. Please. The please was an afterthought, almost an insult in how poorly it fit the rest of the sentence. But she was also doing rapid arithmetic about her options, which numbered approximately 0, and so she let the nearest chair materialize behind her left calf, and she sat. His footsteps moved away. She listened. The room settled back into its pressurized quiet, but she was mapping it now, building the acoustic model. Maybe 15 people total in the lobby space, which was larger than it had first seemed, 30 feet of open marble at minimum between her position and the far wall. Elevator bank to her right, approximately 20 feet. The piano approximately 20 feet to her left. A corridor going deeper into the building behind her, she could feel the subtle change in air pressure from the back of her neck. 2 men stationed close to her, within 8 feet, both trying not to breathe loudly, failing. One of them was the younger one who'd returned her cane. She could tell because his heartbeat was faster. He was nervous, new to this. Maybe 23, 24, whatever this was. She placed her satchel on her lap and set both hands flat on top of it and waited. The man called Moreau came back 10 minutes later. He sat down, not across from her, which is what she expected, but beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him and smell the specific medicinal bite of quick clot bandaging over the blood smell. Eleanor Vale, he said. Every muscle in her body froze. She had not given her name. Your session card, he said. Front pocket of the satchel. She reached into the front pocket and found the laminated credentials she used for studio work. She hadn't even registered it was there. She never had to show it to strangers. She ran her thumb across the braille strip along the bottom edge. Her name, her professional affiliation, her emergency contact number, which was the landline of her building's super because she had nobody else to put on it. "How did you know which pocket?" she said. "Because you touched it twice already without opening it." She hadn't noticed herself doing that. "Eleanor," he said again. A different intonation this time. Not reading it off a card, something else, something she couldn't immediately categorize. She heard him shift his weight, then a sound she absolutely didn't expect. A sharp, almost involuntary exhale, the kind of sound people made when something hit them without physical impact, like recognition. "What?" she said. He didn't answer. "What is it?" she said again, and her voice came out harder than she intended, because fear was doing a slow crawl up the back of her neck now, and she had learned that fear was most dangerous when you let it sit too long in your chest without naming it. "What are you looking at?" "Your neck," he said. Her hand went there before she could stop it. The pendant. Silver chain, old clasp, the weight of it so familiar she'd stopped registering it years ago. Her fingers knew the oval disc shape, the raised relief on the front she had never seen but had traced 10,000 times. A figure with a staff. A traveler. Her father had put it around her neck the morning after the accident, when she was still in the hospital, still learning what the dark meant, and told her it had belonged to her mother. It was the only piece of her mother she had. "That pendant," Moreau said. His voice had changed entirely. The absolute control was still there, but something was moving underneath it now, pressing against the surface like water beneath ice. "What about it?" she said. "Where did you get it?" "It was my mother's." A long silence. "How old are you?" he said. "That's a strange follow-up question." "How old?" 28. She heard him breathe in, heard him hold it. "Were you ever in New Orleans?" he said. She felt the question land somewhere in her sternum before she understood why. Something ancient and half-buried shifted behind her ribs. A smell she'd carried for 15 years that she'd never been able to name. Stone and damp and the sound of water through a grate. A stranger's weight against her shoulder in the dark. "I don't remember New Orleans," she said. "You were there," he said. "Once, during the storm." It was not a question anymore. She pressed both palms flat against the satchel in her lap. "I told you, I don't remember." "I remember enough for both of us," he said. His voice had dropped to something barely above a whisper, which meant it was almost private. Almost in a room with 15 armed men, which meant it was completely the opposite. Everyone in that room heard it, and everyone in that room would have known, from the quality of the silence that followed it, that something had just happened that had nothing to do with business. That terrified her more than the guns, because professional violence she could plan around. Violence with rules and logic and hierarchy was predictable. Men with objectives and chains of command operated within structures she could map. But whatever was in his voice right now had no structure she recognized. She thought, "I need to get out of this building." She thought, "I do not have a way to get out of this building." She thought, "This man knows something about me that I do not know about myself, and he knew it from a necklace I have worn against my skin for 15 years, and that means the thing I thought was mine has roots that go back before I understood what roots were." "Moreau," she said. "Yes." "What happened in New Orleans?" The silence stretched long enough that she counted 8 seconds in her head. "Later," he said. "No, now." "Later," he said again. "Right now I need to know if anyone followed you in. I just walked in off the street, in the rain, to get out of the rain. No one approached you before you came in." "There's nobody on the street. It's a flood out there." He stood. She heard him move a few paces away, heard him speak quietly to someone. The older voice, the continental accent, the one who had said his name like a warning. She couldn't make out the words. He'd lowered his volume deliberately, which told her he was practiced at private conversation in semi-public spaces, which told her this was not his first hotel lockdown. She used the 90 seconds of his absence to count every sound in the room again. Mapped the guards. The young nervous one to her right, closer now. She thought he might have been instructed to watch her. A heavy-set man near the revolving door, she could tell from the sound of his breathing, deep and slow, the controlled respiration of a former athlete. 2 more near the elevator bank. one moving in a slow patrol circuit around the perimeter. The rest clustered near whatever private space Moreau was operating from. She pressed her thumb against the base of her cane, felt the seam there, ran her thumbnail along it once, quickly, and then folded her hand back over the handle. Just checking, just remembering where things were. When Moreau came back, he sat closer than before. She registered the shift in air pressure beside her. He was maybe 18 inches away now. She could hear the faint labor in his breathing that he was suppressing with some effort. "We're going to move soon," he said. "You'll come with us." "I'm not going anywhere with you." "It's not optional." "Everything is optional." He made a sound, not quite a laugh, something shorter, more involuntary than that, like her response had surprised something out of him. "You're not afraid," he said. "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to. Most people who aren't afraid say they're not afraid." "People who are afraid get very precise." She didn't respond. "You counted the exits," he said. "When I walked away just now. You tilted your head and held very still, and you counted the exits." She said nothing. "You've been building an acoustic map since you sat down," he said. "I watched you do it. Incremental, systematic. Someone trained you." "I trained myself." "No," he said. "You have training. There's a difference." Across the lobby, someone's radio crackled, a burst of static and code words she didn't recognize. Moreau stood in a single smooth motion, and she heard his breathing change, the slight constriction that meant pain, managed through will. 15 minutes, he said, mostly to the room. Then quietly to her. "Can you walk quickly?" "Faster than you right now." A pause. "Fair," he said. She stood before he could offer to help her up, settled the satchel strap across her body, gripped the cane, waited. "Stay close," he said. "Don't grab me." "Then stay close." He moved and she followed his sound through the lobby, past the piano. She brushed the edge of the bench with her cane and felt a small, senseless pang at the thought of a Steinway locked up in a lobby while the city flooded outside. Toward the south corridor she had mapped from the air pressure. At the corridor entrance she stopped. "Moreau," she said. He stopped too. "New Orleans," she said. "What happened?" He was quiet for 2 steps worth of time. "My family was killed there," he said. 15 years ago. I was the only one they didn't catch. A child hid me in a basement and kept me alive for 2 days in a storm worse than this one." He paused. She had that pendant around her neck. Eleanor's chest went hollow. Not with surprise. Something older than surprise. "She disappeared before I woke up," he said. "Never knew her name. Never found her." "Until," Eleanor said. "Until about 9 minutes ago," he said. She stood very still in the corridor entrance with her cane against the floor and her satchel against her ribs and a necklace against her throat that she suddenly understood had never fully belonged to her mother. And she felt 15 years of her own life rearranging themselves into a shape she hadn't known they had. "You're wrong," she said, "about who I am." "I'm not wrong." "You can't know that from a pendant." "I know it from your voice," he said. "I have heard your voice every night for 15 years. She had no answer for that. Not a real one. Not one that would make the hollow feeling in her chest recede. The radio crackled again. "We have to move," he said. "Now." She followed. Not because she trusted him. Not because she believed him. Not because she had any reason in the world to walk deeper into whatever this building and this man and this night contained. She followed because somewhere underneath the fear and the arithmetic and the careful distance she had maintained from every person for 15 years, something very old and very small recognized the sound of his voice too, and she needed to know why. Outside, the storm swallowed Chicago whole. The convoy was waiting, and Eleanor Vale stepped into the back of an armored vehicle with a mafia boss she had never met, a pendant she had never questioned, and a memory she had spent 15 years pretending didn't exist. Not knowing that before morning came, she would learn that her father had spent those same 15 years building a bomb, and that she was the detonator. The convoy moved like a black wound through the flooded city. 3 vehicles. Eleanor was in the middle one, Armored, she could tell from the density of the door seal when it closed and the way sound died the moment the latch caught. No engine noise from outside. Reinforced glass. The vehicle sat low and heavy and didn't shudder when the wind hit it the way an ordinary SUV would have. She counted 4 people in the vehicle with her, Moreau to her left. The older voice, continental accent, the one who'd said his name like a warning, in the front passenger seat. 2 others in the back row behind her, breathing at different rhythms. One of them smelled like cigarettes and gun oil. The other one hadn't made a sound since they'd gotten in, and that bothered her more than the ones she could hear. Nobody spoke for the first 6 minutes. Eleanor sat with her satchel in her lap and her cane between her knees and her hands flat on the leather, and she listened to the city outside. Even muffled by the armored doors, she could track their route, the long curve of Lower Walker, the specific percussion of the great sections over the river crossing, the change in road texture as they moved from the loop's old infrastructure onto the newer pavement of the north side. They were heading toward the lake. Moreau had said nothing since they'd gotten in the vehicle. She could hear his breathing, shallow, more controlled than it should have been. The bandaging was temporary, and he knew it, and he was spending energy holding his body still because any unnecessary movement pulled at the wound and he would not show pain in front of his men. She understood that logic even if she found it exhausting. "You need a doctor," she said. "I have one." "When?" "When we arrive. And if you lose consciousness before then." "I won't. That's not a medical opinion. That's stubbornness." From the front seat, the older voice made a quiet sound. Not quite amusement. The sound a person made when they found something funny that they decided not to find funny. "That's Casimir," Moreau said. "He finds things funny at inconvenient times." "I find things accurate," Casimir said, without turning around. "The woman is accurate." "She's also sitting right here," Eleanor said. "Yes," Casimir said. "That is also accurate." She heard Moreau shift his weight by maybe 2 inches, heard the faint catch in his exhale. "Tell me about your father," he said. The question came without transition, without softening, just dropped into the silence of the vehicle like a stone into dark water. "Why?" "Because I need to understand something." "That's not an answer to why." "Martin Vale," he said. "He taught music theory at the University Extension program. Private piano instruction. He died in a car accident on the Dan Ryan 11 years ago. You were 17. You were in the vehicle." A pause. "That's what public records say." Eleanor's jaw tightened. "Then you don't need me to tell you anything." Public records don't explain why Martin Vale's name appears in 3 different sets of financial documentation belonging to organizations that don't officially exist. The vehicle hit a long, smooth stretch, and the engine note changed and Eleanor said nothing for a full 10 seconds. "He was a music teacher," she said. "He was also a forensic accountant. Those aren't mutually exclusive." "For most people, no," Moreau said. "For a man who built offshore financial architecture for 6 of the most powerful criminal networks in North America, it required a certain talent for compartmentalization." Eleanor stopped breathing for a moment. Just a moment. Then she breathed again carefully and said, "You're wrong." "I'm not wrong, Eleanor." "Don't say my name like that." "Like what?" "Like you know me." Silence. "I know your father's work," he said. "Better than I'd like to. He built structures that moved money through 17 different jurisdictions without leaving a traceable signature. 14 years of it. Clean. Invisible. He was the best I ever encountered, and I've encountered the best." Another pause. "I did not know until approximately 8 months ago that Martin Vale was the architect. I knew the system, not the man." Eleanor's hands pressed flat against the leather of the satchel. Her father's hands. She remembered them. The specific way he splayed his left hand across a chord wider than most pianists could manage. The stretch in his 4th finger that she'd inherited but never quite mastered. He'd had calluses in the wrong places for a man who only played piano. She'd noticed it as a child and asked him, and he'd said it was from gardening, and she'd believed him because he did garden, actually. Tomatoes along the back fence in summer, and children believe what they're given. "He's dead," she said. "Yes." "Then whatever he did or didn't do is finished," Not exactly.
Moreau, before he died, Moreau said, and his voice had shifted into something careful and deliberate now, the way people spoke when they were delivering information they'd rehearsed. Your father extracted a complete financial record of every transaction, every account, every political connection, every contract those networks ever ran through his system. Everything. 16 years of it. He encoded it and disappeared the key. Eleanor heard the rain against the armored door. That's why Gabriel Ricci tried to have you killed tonight, she said. A pause. Ricci tried to have me killed tonight because I have been actively dismantling his distribution network for the past 4 months, Moreau said. The assassination attempt at the Blackthorn was business. What concerns me more is that Ricci's people have been watching you for 3 weeks. She went cold. Watching me, she said. Your apartment on Diversey, the studio on South Wabash, the coffee place on Halstead where you go Tuesday mornings. His voice was utterly flat. They've had 2 people on you for 22 days. And you knew. I found out 6 days ago. And you didn't. She stopped. Her voice had gone sharp in a way she hadn't intended. She pulled it back. You didn't think to warn me. I didn't know what you were to me 6 days ago. She turned her face toward the window. The rain was a white noise against the glass, and she pressed 2 fingers against the cool surface and felt the vibration of the city moving underneath them. He didn't know what she was to him 6 days ago. She turned that sentence over and examined it from every angle and found it frightening from every one. What do they think I have? She said. The key. What key? That's what we need to determine.
I don't have anything. I have sheet music and a keyboard synthesizer and 3 pens that are probably all out of ink. Your father left you something, Moreau said. Whether you know it or not. The vehicle slowed. Stopped. She heard the thick mechanical sound of a private gate opening. Not an electronic buzz. Something more substantial. Hydraulic. They moved forward, turned left, descended what felt like a parking structure ramp. Stopped again. Doors opened. The air that came in was different, underground, climate-controlled. No rain. We're here, Moreau said, unnecessarily. The penthouse was on the 43rd floor. She knew it was the 43rd floor because she counted elevator seconds and calculated against standard floor height measurements and came up with 41 to 44, and she would have bet on 43 based on the specific resonance of the elevator shaft and the slight pressure change in her ears. She didn't share this information. She was building a map, and she preferred to do it quietly. The space she stepped into was enormous. She could tell from the acoustic return of her cane on hardwood. The echo had too much travel, too much delay. The ceiling was high, and the square footage was significant. The climate system was barely audible, which meant it was expensive. She heard the specific white noise of a professional soundproofing installation in the walls, which you only put in if noise was a regular feature of your life that you needed to contain. Someone guided her, not Moreau, a different person, a woman who took her arm with a firm and practiced efficiency and said, "There's a step here, and then we turn right," with the tone of someone doing a specific job. "I'm fine," Eleanor said. "I know," the woman said. "There's still a step." She stepped, turned right. The woman released her arm without ceremony, which Eleanor appreciated more than she would have expected. A doctor arrived quickly. She heard the latch of a medical bag, smelled antiseptic, heard Moreau's breathing change as the wound was examined. She was guided to a chair in what she determined was a large open living area. She sat. Nobody spoke to her. She used the time. The penthouse had multiple exits. Standard interior doors, she counted 4 distinct sound signatures when air moved through the space. A large window bank along what she oriented as the east wall, facing the lake. Another corridor to the north that sounded like it went toward private rooms. The woman who had guided her was still in the room. She could hear her on a phone, speaking in a low professional monotone in what sounded like Polish. Casimir settled into a chair somewhere to her left. "Tea?" he said. "No." "Coffee?" "No." "Water?" "I'm fine." "You're not fine," Casimir said pleasantly.
You are sitting in the private residence of a man you met 40 minutes ago under conditions that any rational person would describe as alarming. But you are holding yourself very still and speaking in complete sentences and not crying. So clearly you have decided that presenting as fine is strategically preferable to presenting as what you actually are. Eleanor looked in the direction of his voice. What do I actually appear to be? She said. Terrified, he said, and furious. And also, he paused, seeming to consider, working something out. In here. She heard him tap his own temple. You have been working something out since the lobby. I don't know what you think you're seeing. I am seeing a woman who was told something about her father that broke something inside her and has chosen to feel that later, in private, when it is safe. He paused. Which is intelligent, but the choice itself tells me quite a lot. It tells you nothing. It tells me you believe it, Casimir said. What he told you in the car. You believe it. You did not believe it immediately. I heard when you stopped believing it. That is a very specific sound. But you have arrived at belief now, and that is informing everything you are doing. She didn't respond. She believed it because she had always known, somewhere below language, that her father's world had edges she was not permitted to see. The calluses on his hands, the way certain phone calls sent him out of rooms, the careful blankness on his face whenever she asked about money. They'd never had money, and then sometimes they had had money, and he'd explained it with the kind of explanations that answered the surface of the question and nothing underneath. She was 13 when the accident happened. She was 13, and she remembered everything about the accident except the thing that caused it. The skid, the guardrail, the sound of the world rotating, her father's voice, and then not her father's voice, the dark after that, and then the permanent dark, and then the hospital, and then the pendant around her neck, and the story about her mother that she had never thought to question because who questions the last thing their father gives them? She pressed the pendant between two fingers. What do you know about this? She said. The pendant? Casimir's voice was careful. I know it belonged to a young woman named Clara Devane. She was 19 years old, and she was present at a massacre in New Orleans 15 years ago. She survived. She was also a friend of Martin Vale's. He paused. How Martin Vale came to have it, I cannot tell you. Clara Devane, Eleanor said. She disappeared shortly after the massacre. We have not been able to locate her. Was she... Eleanor stopped. Was she connected to the network? A pause. Peripherally, Casimir said. Which means yes. Which means yes. She set the pendant down against her chest. Everything her father had given her, the music, the discipline, the training disguised as education, the private lessons in how to move through space, how to map rooms by sound, how to be inside a crowd and remain oriented and never show confusion, never show the specific kind of confusion that invited people to help you, to take control, to substitute their judgment for yours. She had believed he did it because he loved her, because he wanted her independent, because he felt guilty. Maybe he did it because he was preparing her. The thought sat in her chest like a cold stone. Moreau came in from the north corridor. She could tell it was him before he spoke. His footsteps had a particular weight, left heel striking slightly heavier than right, the gait of someone who'd had an old injury that had healed imperfectly. He moved more easily now. The doctor had done something. The suite at the end of the hall is yours, he said. Clean clothes in the closet. I don't know your size. Mara made her best guess. I'm not staying. The city is under a flood advisory. Your neighborhood is... I'm not staying because of the weather. Then why? Because I don't know you, Eleanor said. Because you're telling me things about my father that you have no way of proving to me tonight and expecting me to simply accept them. Because you've brought me here without my consent and you're now offering me a room as if this is hospitality. A silence. You're right, he said. She hadn't expected that. About most of it, he said. Not all. Which part am I wrong about? About not knowing me. His voice was flat again, but a different kind of flat. Not the controlled weapon quality flat from the lobby, something else. Something that had the shape of an old wound. You knew me for 2 days when I was 17 years old and bleeding to death in a basement in New Orleans while a hurricane took apart everything I had ever known.
You sat beside me in the dark. You sang to me badly because I asked you to, and you didn't know any songs all the way through. You told me your name was Ellie and that your dad would come find you in the morning." He stopped. "He came. You left. I never saw your face." Eleanor's throat tightened. She did not remember. That was the thing that frightened her more than anything else in this room, in this building, in this night. She did not remember. Trauma had taken it. The accident 3 years later had taken whatever trauma had left. She was standing in a stranger's penthouse, being told the story of herself, and she had no way to verify it, and no way to deny it, and no foothold in the truth either way. "I need time," she said. "I know. Alone. Yes. And I need you to understand that whatever happened between a 10-year-old girl and a 17-year-old boy in a basement in another city does not obligate me to anything. Not to you. Not to—" "I know," he said, quieter. "I'm not yours," she said. "Whatever you said in the lobby. I am not yours." The silence after that was long enough that she started to wonder if he'd moved away without her hearing. Then, "No," he said. "You're not." His footsteps moved toward the corridor. "There's a Steinway in the room at the end of the East Hall," he said, without turning back. "If you need it." She heard him stop at what sounded like a doorway. "My father's name was Edouard," he said. "He ordered the massacre that killed my mother and my 2 brothers because a man threatened to expose his financial network." A long pause. "I didn't know until years later. By then I was already what I am." He stopped. "I'm telling you that because you'll hear it eventually from someone who wants to use it. Better you hear it from me." He left. She sat with that information in the dark behind her eyes and felt its shape. His father had ordered a massacre to protect a financial network. Her father had built a financial network that laundered money for men who ordered massacres. She pressed both palms against her thighs. Casimir had not left the room. She could hear him breathing, the slow, measured respiration of a man who had learned patience as a professional skill. "How long has he known?" she said. "That Martin Vale built the system?" 8 months. A pause. "That you were the child from New Orleans, as of tonight. And Gabriel Ricci. Ricci has known about the encrypted archive for approximately 14 months. He has been looking for the key since Martin Vale died. Why does he think I have it?" "Because Martin Vale spent the last 18 months of his life doing 3 things," Casimir said. "Encoding the archive, teaching his blind daughter to play his original compositions, and ensuring that no copy of those compositions existed anywhere but inside her memory." Eleanor stopped breathing. She heard the rain against the 43rd floor glass. Her father's symphony, the unfinished one. She had played it so many times that it lived in her hands before it lived in her mind, the way old music does. She had played it at his funeral. She had played it in studio sessions as a private touchstone. She had played it on the cheap upright piano in her Diversey apartment on the nights when the world felt too large and too dark, and she needed something that was entirely his and entirely hers. Every note. She had played every note 1,000 times, and now Casimir was telling her that every note was something else entirely. "He put it inside the music," she said. Casimir didn't answer, which was itself an answer. She stood up. The satchel was still across her body. She gripped the cane. "I want to see the piano," she said. "Of course," Casimir said, standing. "Alone," she said. A pause. "I'll show you the room." He guided her down the East Hall without touching her and stopped at a door and opened it and said, "The bench is directly in front of you, approximately 12 feet. The keyboard faces east." And then he pulled the door mostly closed. She found the bench, sat, spread both hands across the keys without pressing. 88 keys. The same 88 keys her father had mapped into her hands before she understood what a map was. She sat in the dark that was the only dark she'd ever known, and she tried to decide whether she was about to cry. She was not. She pressed her right thumb against middle C. The Steinway answered back with the cleanest note she had heard in years. She began to play her father's symphony. And somewhere in the third movement, 4 bars into a passage she had always believed was simply beautiful, she heard it, buried in the interval structure, in the specific arithmetic of the chord voicing, in the place where the melody broke, and the left hand held a note one beat too long before resolving. She heard it the way you heard something you had always known was there, but had never had a reason to look for. Numbers. Her father's voice in her memory. Listen past the music, Ellie. There's always something underneath the music. She stopped playing, sat in the silence, and understood, with a clarity so complete it felt like the floor dropping away beneath her, that she had been carrying the most dangerous document in American criminal history inside her own perfect memory for 11 years, and that every person who wanted it, every person who feared it, every person who might kill for it, was now either in this building or closing in on it, including, possibly, the man who had just told her she was safe. She pressed her hands flat against her thighs. Her thumb found the seam at the base of the cane, and from somewhere in the building below, she heard the specific sound of an alarm. Not a fire alarm. Something more deliberate than that. A single sustained tone, low frequency, the kind of sound that didn't exist to warn civilians but to signal personnel. It ran for exactly 4 seconds and cut off. Then boots on a hard floor, moving fast, below and to the left. Eleanor stood up from the piano bench. Her thumb found the seam at the base of the cane and held it there. She had not pressed it yet. She wanted to understand what she was hearing before she made any decision she couldn't reverse. The sound of boots multiplied. 2 sets, then 4, converging on something below her. Not a drill. The cadence was wrong for a drill. Too irregular. The specific arrhythmic scramble of men responding to something that had already happened rather than something they were rehearsing for. She crossed to the door, found the handle, opened it a fraction. The east corridor was empty. She opened the door further and stepped out and stood still. Casimir's voice came from the direction of the main living area, clipped and rapid, in Polish. Then a response she didn't understand, also rapid. Then a silence that had the shape of a decision being made. She moved down the hall toward it. The living area was different when she entered. The air pressure was off, too many people had moved through recently, and the ambient sounds were reorganized. 2 men near the north corridor she hadn't heard before. The woman named Mara, still on a phone but a different phone, and someone else. Someone standing very still near the east window bank who had not been in this room 20 minutes ago. He was standing too still. That was the thing. Everyone else in the room had a micro-movement pattern, the small constant shifts of people managing tension. This person had none. That kind of stillness was trained, the stillness of someone who had learned to manage their own body as a tactical instrument. Casimir, she said. Miss Vale. His voice was wrong, not frightened. Casimir struck her as a man who had made a separate peace with fear some decades back, but recalibrated. He was working something out in real time, and it was showing. What happened? There has been a development at the harbor, he said. Mr. Moreau has gone to address it. He left. 20 minutes ago, there was... Casimir stopped, started again. The convoy that escorted us was followed from the Blackthorn. Ricci's people tracked the route. Lucien went to redirect the situation. He left me here. With full security contingent, yes. She turned her face toward the person standing too still by the window. Who is that? She said. Casimir paused a half beat too long. Adrian Vega, the still man said. His own voice. He introduced himself, which meant he had decided she should know his name, which meant he had made a calculation about what she was and what she wasn't, and had landed somewhere that made him comfortable. I'm Mr. Moreau's chief of operations. I haven't heard your name before tonight, Eleanor said. That's because I'm good at my job. His voice was cultured. Mid-30s, she thought. The accent was coastal, educated, the kind of English that came from expensive schooling and deliberate maintenance. He was not a man who had come up through violence. He had come up through intelligence, and intelligence was considerably more dangerous when it decided to become violent. Miss Vale, he said, I understand this evening has been disorienting. I want to assure you that your safety is the organization's primary concern right now. The organization, she said. Lucien's operation, yes. And where does Lucien's operation stand on me specifically? You are an asset under protection. She noted the word. Asset, not guest. Not person. Asset. I'd like to speak with Casimir alone, she said. Of course, Adrian said. He didn't move. She waited. He still didn't move. That requires you to leave the room, she said. I'm afraid the security protocol requires… Casimir, she said. Does the security protocol require Adrian Vega to stand 12 feet from me at all times? A pause. She heard something careful in the pause. Standard procedure during an active threat situation is to consolidate personnel, Casimir said. He was choosing his words the way you chose steps on uncertain ground. That's not an answer to what I asked. No, Casimir said. It isn't. The room held its configuration for 3 seconds. Then Adrian said, Why don't I give you a moment? And his footsteps moved toward the north corridor, and she heard him stop just inside the corridor rather than proceeding down it. And she understood that he was 12 feet away instead of 20, but that was the compromise on offer, and there was no better one available. She crossed the room toward Casimir's breathing. Talk to me, she said, under the piano music she was not playing, under her breath. Not here, he said. Same volume. Then, Miss Vale. His voice shifted back to its normal register. Might I suggest you rest? It's nearly midnight, and I'd rather hear more about the building's history, she said. Architectural features, specifically the service infrastructure. A pause so brief most people wouldn't have caught it. There is a remarkable wine cellar, Casimir said. Perhaps I can show you. Adrian's voice came from the corridor entrance. The lower levels are restricted during lockdown. I'm sure an exception can be made for a brief tour, Casimir said pleasantly. Miss Vale is feeling understandably confined. A silence. I'll accompany you, Adrian said. Naturally, Casimir said. He guided her toward a door she hadn't mapped yet, to the south side of the living area. A staircase going down 1 level. She counted 11 steps, turned right, counted 8 feet of corridor. A secondary room, smaller, the acoustic return suggesting stone walls and lower ceiling. Racks of some kind along 2 walls, wood and glass, wine storage, the smell of oak and temperature control. Adrian stopped at the doorway. I'll be here, he said. Casimir moved her further into the room. She heard the distance between them, and Adrian increased to what she gauged as 25 feet before Casimir stopped. His lips were approximately 6 inches from her left ear when he spoke. There's something wrong with tonight, he said. Yes, she said. The harbor situation. Lucien received the call 40 minutes ago. It came through a verified channel. I authenticated the source myself, or what I believed was the source. A pause. I am no longer certain. You think it's a setup? I think Lucien has been moved away from this building with great precision and efficiency, and that the timing relative to Adrian's arrival is not coincidental. Adrian wasn't here when we arrived. No, he came in through the private garage entrance approximately 12 minutes after we did. His stated reason was to coordinate security during Lucien's absence. Casimir's breathing was carefully controlled, but she could hear the stress in it. Adrian Vega has been with this organization for 9 years. He is the second most trusted person in Lucien's operation. But, she said, 8 months ago, around the time Lucien began investigating the origin of the financial system, Martin Vale's system, Adrian began taking certain meetings that were not on the organizational calendar. A pause. I noticed. I noted it. I did not act on it because I had no confirmation, only pattern. You're confirming it now. I am telling you my concern. Yes. She pressed the base of her cane against the stone floor. He wants the key, she said. Everyone wants the key, Casimir said. The question is who he wants it for. Ricci. Possibly. Or someone else entirely. The archive your father built contains information that is of value to a great many parties, not all of them criminal. Government agencies, private intelligence firms, people who would pay enormous amounts to ensure that certain records in that archive were never made public. She thought about that. She thought about her father's hands on the keys, the specific way he had guided her through the third movement of the symphony. Not teaching her the melody, she had that already. Teaching her the internal logic, the reason each note followed the other, the reason certain chords resolved the way they did. Listen past the music, Ellie. She had been 7 years old the first time he said that. Casimir, she said, I need you to get a message to Moreau. All communication channels that don't run through Adrian are currently... Then find one that does, she said. And don't let him know you're doing it. A pause. That is considerably more complicated than... The door at the top of the staircase opened. Adrian's footsteps on the 11 steps, even and unhurried. Casimir stepped back from her. She heard the adjustment, the careful physical separation of two people who had been speaking close together, the micro-shuffle that was supposed to look casual. We should get back upstairs, Adrian said. There's been another development. His voice was smooth, completely smooth, the surface of something very deep. Of course, Casimir said. They went back upstairs. The development was this. A secondary team had been identified in the building below, allegedly Ricci's advance unit attempting to breach the lower levels. Adrian delivered this information with the clipped efficiency of a man used to briefings. Two of the guards were being redirected downstairs to support the building's security team, which left 4 people in the penthouse. Eleanor counted Adrian, Casimir, Mara, and the nervous young one from the lobby who she had almost forgotten about. She went back toward the East Hall. The piano, she said to nobody in particular. Of course, Adrian said. She walked back to the piano room, sat at the bench, did not play. She sat and she thought about the architecture of what was happening, and she took it apart the way she took apart music. Not the surface, the structure. The harbor alarm had moved Moreau out of the building. Adrian had arrived immediately after. The lower-level security alert had now thinned the penthouse guard. The remaining personnel in the room with her consisted of one man she was no longer certain about, one woman whose loyalties she had no information on, one anxious kid, and Casimir, who was afraid. This was a funnel. Everything tonight had been a funnel. She was the point at the bottom of it. She breathed in through her nose slowly and held it for 3 counts and breathed out. She played 1 chord. 1. Let it sustain and die. Then she sat with her hands in her lap and she waited. It took 11 minutes. She knew it was 11 minutes because she counted them in musical time, 4/4 measure by measure, the way her father had taught her to keep track of time in situations where looking at a clock was not possible. 11 minutes after she sat back down, the door to the piano room opened. She heard Casimir's footsteps first, quicker than they should have been, slightly off his normal rhythm, followed by Adrian's, even as always. And then the sound of Mara's voice from further back in the corridor, sharp, a single syllable, a protest cut off. And then a sound she classified before she consciously registered it, the metallic mechanical precision of a handgun being drawn from a holster. Casimir, she said, step to the right. She heard him hesitate. Now, she said. He stepped right. Miss Vale, Adrian said. His voice had changed. All the smoothness was still there, but the pretense beneath it was gone. It was the same voice, same cadences, same careful pronunciation. But the thing it had been pretending to be was absent now, and what remained was considerably simpler. I've been patient with you tonight because I understand this has been a disorienting experience. I want to continue being patient. I need you to help me. With what? She said. You know what. Tell me anyway. The archive, he said. The key. Whatever form your father put it in, I need it. I don't have it. You played the symphony 20 minutes ago. I heard 4 bars from the security feed before you stopped. You stopped because you found something. He moved further into the room. She tracked him by footstep, closer to the left side of the piano. You found something and you stopped playing because you understood what it meant. I need what you found. She said nothing. Miss Vale, still patient, still smooth. I'm not Gabriel Ricci. I'm not going to hurt you unnecessarily. I have a buyer for this information who is willing to pay enough money to ensure that everyone in this room disappears permanently and comfortably to a location of their choosing, including you, especially you. You don't want this life. You didn't ask for it. Your father made choices that put you in the center of something you were never meant to be in. A pause. I'm offering you a way out of it. Who's the buyer? She said. That's not your concern. It's completely my concern. Let's focus on who, she said, and put enough into the single word that it stopped him mid-thought. He exhaled. A private intelligence collective, he said. They want the political records, the blackmail files, the assassination contracts. They don't care about the financial architecture. They care about names, politicians, judges, military contractors. They want the leverage. So they can use it, she said. So they can ensure it's never used against them, he said. It's fundamentally the same thing from a different direction. And Ricci. Ricci is a problem that will resolve itself. His organization is already fracturing. Adrian moved again. She tracked him. He was circling, not closing. This is cleaner than whatever Lucien has planned. Lucien wants to burn it down. He wants the satisfaction of watching everything collapse. That's a man with a grudge, not a strategy. I'm offering you a strategy. From the doorway, Casimir said, very quietly, Adrian, think about this. I have thought about this, Adrian said. For 8 months I have thought about almost nothing else. A pause. Casimir, I have genuine respect for you. I'm asking you to sit down and stay quiet. And if I don't, Casimir said, then I'll make a decision about you that I'd rather not make. A silence. She heard Casimir sit, the creak of a chair from the corridor. He had been guided out of the room or had moved himself. She wasn't certain. Now it was just Adrian and her. He came closer. She heard him stop on the other side of the piano, the instrument between them. I know you don't have it written down, he said. I know it's in your head. So you're going to play it for me, everything, from the beginning, and I'm going to record it. And then you're going to walk out of this building with Casimir and $10 million in an account of your choice, and you're going to go live your life somewhere that isn't Chicago. And Moreau, she said. Silence. Lucien is at the harbor, Adrian said. There's a situation there that is more serious than he anticipated. She went cold from the inside out. You set him up, she said. I redirected him to a controlled environment where he can be managed while you set him up, she said again. Not a question the second time. Adrian breathed in. Lucien is not going to be harmed. He's going to be contained long enough for this transaction to complete. Then the situation resolves itself. You're lying, she said. I'm simplifying, he said. There's a distinction. She pressed both hands flat against her thighs. She thought about what she knew. Moreau at the harbor, walking into something Adrian had constructed. Casimir in the corridor, neutralized. Mara, unknown. The young one, probably covering the main exit. 4 walls of a room she had mapped. A piano bench she was sitting on. A man with a gun 6 feet away, on the other side of an 800-pound Steinway Grand. She thought about her father. Not the father she had believed in, the one she was only now beginning to understand. The man who had built an empire of numbers in the dark and then decided at some point she could not identify that he was done with it. Who had spent the last 18 months of his life constructing a weapon and hiding it in the one place no one would ever think to look. Inside the memory of a blind girl who loved music. You're going to be afraid, Ellie, when it comes. And that's fine. Fear is just information. Listen to it the same way you listen to everything else. Find out what it's telling you, and then decide what to do with it. She had been 12 years old. He had been teaching her scales. She remembered it with perfect clarity. Her hands on the keys, his hands guiding her wrists, the smell of coffee and his terrible aftershave, and those words delivered in exactly the same tone he used to explain chord theory or the circle of fifths, casual and precise and completely serious. She had thought he was talking about music. He was not talking about music. I need to think, she said. You've had time to think, Adrian said. I need more. Miss Vale. 3 minutes, she said. I'll play it. Everything, but I need 3 minutes to prepare. A pause. 2, he said. Fine. She heard him settle back against the wall. She heard the specific way his weight shifted when he crossed his arms. She had been tracking his body position this entire conversation, building his physical map the same way she built all her maps. She sat at the Steinway. She placed both hands on the keys. And she began to play. Not the symphony, not yet. She played something else first. A simple repetitive figure in the right hand, something that would read as warm-up, something that gave her hands a reason to move while the rest of her attention went somewhere else entirely. The cane was resting against the side of the piano bench. She had set it there when she sat down. She felt for it now with her left knee. Found it. The handle was within reach if she dropped her left hand from the keys. Adrian was 6 feet away, other side of the piano, gun drawn. To close that distance, he had to come around the end of the piano, which meant either the keyboard end sheets, which put him immediately within her reach, or the tail end, which was further away but gave him a clear line. If he moved toward the keyboard end, she had maybe 1 second. She kept playing the warm-up figure. She thought about what was at the harbor, what Adrian had built there, whether Moreau had walked into it already or whether there was still time. She thought about Casimir in the corridor and whether Casimir had done the thing she'd asked him to do, find a channel outside Adrian's knowledge, get a message out. She had asked him 11 minutes ago. 11 minutes was enough time. Maybe. "I'm ready," she said. She let the warm-up figure resolve to a rest. She felt Adrian shift his weight off the wall. She heard him take 1 step toward the keyboard end of the piano. Her left hand dropped off the keys and found the cane handle. Her thumb found the seam and pressed, and she felt the click of the internal mechanism releasing, and in the fraction of a second before Adrian took his second step, she had already made every decision there was to make, with the cold clarity of someone who had spent 15 years being underestimated, being guided, being managed, being told where to step and where to sit and where to wait, and had spent every one of those 15 years paying attention. She came off the bench as he reached the corner of the piano, and the titanium blade caught the light she couldn't see, and Adrian Vega discovered what everyone always discovered too late about Eleanor Vale, that her blindness had never once been the thing about her that mattered. What mattered was that she had been listening. She had been listening to every room she had ever entered, every person she had ever stood near, every threat that had ever tried to dress itself up as something manageable. And she had been cataloging and mapping and preparing with the quiet patience of someone who understood that the moment would come, and that when it came, there would be no second version of it. Adrian's gun hand was right. She knew this because every time he'd shifted his weight in the last 20 minutes, he'd done it with his right shoulder leading, and right shoulder dominant people drew from the right. And when he'd come around the keyboard end of the piano, his right side was toward the open room and his left was toward her, which meant the gun was on the far side of his body, and she had a half-second window before he could bring it to bear. She took the window. The blade came up in her left hand, and she drove her right palm hard into the inside of his gun wrist as she closed the distance, deflecting the line before he could establish it. She felt the gun discharge. The sound was enormous in the enclosed room, pressure wave hitting her face, her ears screaming. But the round went into the ceiling because his wrist was already rotating under her palm pressure, and then she had the wrist locked into a joint manipulation that his body could not argue with, and she drove him sideways into the piano keys with her full body weight behind it. The Steinway produced a sound like a chord played by a falling building. Adrian's back hit the keys and his breath left him in a hard grunt, and Eleanor had his gun wrist pinned against the fallboard with the blade of the cane pressed across his throat, not cutting, positioned, the titanium edge making its intentions clear. 3 seconds from bench to this. She was breathing hard. She could feel her pulse in her hands. "Drop it," she said. His fingers opened. The gun hit the floor and slid under the piano bench. He was breathing in shallow, rapid pulls, not from pain, from recalibration. She could feel his body thinking, assessing, calculating the angle. "Don't," she said. "I have your throat. Any direction you move into this edge. Think about that before you think about anything else." He went still. "Casimir," she said. No answer from the corridor. "Casimir." "Here." His voice came from further away than she expected. Further down the corridor, past the doorway, strained. "Are you hurt?" "Restrained," he said. "Zip ties. The young one, he's—" A thud from further away. Then nothing. She pressed the blade a fraction closer to Adrian's skin and felt him breathe through it. "Who's in the corridor?" she said to him. "No one now," he said. His voice was tight, but still controlled. She had to give him that. "The young one?" The nervous kid from the lobby. "Petrov," Adrian said. "He was mine. He's also apparently not particularly effective." "What did Casimir do to him?" "Based on the sound, I would guess something with a wine bottle." A pause. "Casimir is older than he appears." From the corridor,
I am also more annoyed than I appear, Casimir said. If someone could come assist with these ties. One moment, Eleanor said. She pressed the blade against Adrian's wrist instead of his throat and crouched quickly and found the gun with her free hand and stood up with it. She had never fired a gun.
She had held them twice in her life, once in her father's desk drawer when she was 12, and the second time at a private security demonstration Casimir had described to her in meticulous detail approximately 30 minutes ago when he was explaining the layout of the penthouse, and she had not entirely been mapping the penthouse. She ejected the magazine with her thumb, found it, slid it back in. Safety. She found the safety and confirmed its position. She pointed it at where Adrian's center mass should be. Move to the corner, she said. Left corner, toward the wall. He moved. She backed toward the corridor without taking the gun off his direction. Casimir, I need your hands. Slightly difficult without the use of my... I know, come to the doorway. She heard him shuffle. Zip-tied ankles, she guessed, or wrists behind his back, and felt his presence at the door. She reached back with her left hand and found his wrists, found the plastic, found the seam. She had the blade in her left hand. She worked by feel. It took 40 seconds. The tie snapped. Ankles, Casimir said. He was already bending. She heard him deal with the ankle ties himself. He'd gotten his hands in front first. Mara, she said. Secondary bedroom, Casimir said, straightening. Locked in. Petrov has the key. Had the key. The key is now on the floor near an unconscious man and a significant amount of broken glass. He crossed to Adrian's corner and she heard him pick something up. I'm going to ask you, Adrian, to put your hands behind your head. I'm also going to take a great deal of personal satisfaction in the next several minutes. Adrian said nothing. She heard the specific sounds of Casimir managing the situation. She didn't need to supervise it. She trusted him in the way you trusted a person who had chosen which side to stand on when it cost something. She crossed to the window bank. 43 floors of Chicago below her, she pressed her forehead against the cold glass and breathed. The harbor. She needed to think about the harbor. Moreau had walked into something Adrian had built, and she had been up here dealing with Adrian for approximately 20 minutes, which meant whatever was happening down at the harbor had been happening for 20 minutes, plus the 40 minutes since Moreau had left the building. An hour. An hour was an enormous amount of time in a controlled environment setup. Either he was already out of it, or he was dead, or he was contained somewhere and still alive because Adrian needed him alive to maintain organizational control long enough for the transaction to complete. She did not allow herself to sit with the third option. Casimir, she said. Phone. Working on it, he said. Adrian's personal phone is not Adrian's, a clean one. There is one in the kitchen, second drawer left of the refrigerator. It's a burner I placed there 6 months ago for exactly this category of situation. She was already moving. She found the kitchen by the change in floor from hardwood to tile, and the refrigerator by its hum and the drawer by count. The phone was there. Prepaid, already charged. She pressed it into Casimir's hand when he came in 30 seconds behind her. Call someone who can get to the harbor, she said. I'm going to need you to define someone, he said. Someone Moreau trusts who Adrian doesn't control. That list has become shorter this evening. Then call everyone on it, she said. He dialed. She stood in the kitchen and listened to him work through 3 calls in 12 minutes. The first in Polish, the second in what she thought was Russian, the third in English, clipped and technical. She didn't interrupt. She had given him the problem. He was built for this kind of problem. While he worked, she went back to the piano room. Adrian was zip-tied to the radiator in the corner. She could hear his breathing from the doorway, steady, controlled, furious beneath the control. She sat on the piano bench, not to play, to think. Her father's symphony was inside her, and she understood now what it contained, and she understood that the moment she played it in its entirety in front of anyone with a recording device, the leverage it represented was gone. It would become a document. Documents could be copied, distributed, sold, buried, destroyed. The leverage existed precisely because it lived only in one place. Inside her. Which meant she was the weapon. Which meant she had always been the weapon. She pressed both palms flat on the keys without sounding them. She thought about Moreau at 17, bleeding in a basement in the dark, a city coming apart overhead. She thought about herself at 10, crouched beside a stranger in that same dark, doing what her father had always taught her to do in the dark. Be still, be useful, listen for what comes next. She thought about her father's hands. She stood up. "Casimir," she called. He appeared in the doorway. "I have people moving to the harbor, 20 minutes, possibly 15. That's too long." "It's what's available." "Where at the harbor?" "The receiving facility on Calumet. I know where Calumet is," she said. She did. She had mapped Chicago in sections years ago, the way she mapped every city she spent time in, transit lines, arterial roads, landmark sound signatures. The Calumet facility was industrial, south side, deep water access, the kind of location that had multiple vehicle approaches and minimal pedestrian presence at midnight. Good place to contain someone. Bad place to be contained. "I need a car," she said. Casimir was quiet for a moment. "Eleanor," he said. It was the first time he had used her name. She noticed it. "He went there because I was here," she said. "Because Adrian told him I needed to be protected. And Moreau left to handle the threat, and the threat was manufactured, and he is down there right now because of me." So, Casimir said. "So I need a car." Another moment. "There is a vehicle in the private garage, Adrian's personal car. He arrived in it, and the keys will be on him." He paused. "I will drive." "No, you stay here with Adrian and Mara, and you contact whoever else you can reach. If this goes wrong, someone needs to know what happened. And if I don't come back," she said, "the symphony goes with me, which means nobody gets what they want. Tell Adrian that. Tell him that's his insurance policy for keeping Moreau alive. As long as I'm alive and functional, the archive is intact. The moment anything happens to either of us, it dies." She heard Casimir process this. "That's a significant gamble," he said. "It's the only chip I have," she said. She found Adrian's keys on the kitchen counter where Casimir had left them. She found her satchel on the floor by the piano bench. She found her cane. "The garage elevator," she said. "To your left, end of the south corridor," Casimir said. "B2. The car is a black sedan, third bay on the right. It has GPS navigation with voice output. Press the blue button on the steering column." She was already moving. "Eleanor," he said, one more time. She stopped. "He is not an easy man," Casimir said. "You understand that. Whatever you are going to him, you understand what you are going to." "I understand," she said. "And you're going anyway." "Yes." A pause. "Your father," Casimir said slowly, "was a complicated man who made terrible choices and spent the last years of his life trying to make them mean something. I knew him, briefly, before everything." He stopped. "He would be—" Another stop. "He would not be surprised by you. That is perhaps the most I can say." She took that and held it, and didn't examine it because if she examined it right now, she would not be able to move. She went to the garage. The harbor road was empty and wet, and the GPS voice was a flat American baritone that told her distances and turns in precise increments, and she drove the way she did everything, by listening to the road through the tires, by feeling the vehicle's weight shift in curves, by counting seconds between landmarks. She had driven 3 times in her adult life, all in empty parking structures with Donna Chen narrating from the passenger seat and laughing too hard to be useful. This was different. Her knuckles were white on the wheel. She drove. 17 minutes south on the lakeshore and then east. And then the GPS said turn left in 200 feet, and she turned and the road surface changed under her. Older, heavier, industrial asphalt. And the air that came through the vents changed too. Colder, carrying the lake and something chemical, and the deep iron smell of old machinery. She pulled over 2 blocks from the coordinates Casimir had given her, killed the engine, sat. She had a gun with 1 magazine. She had a blade in her cane. She had a building she had never been inside in a location she had never visited, and she had no map and no Casimir, and no advance information about how many people were inside or how they were positioned. She had what she always had. She opened the car door and stepped into the wet dark, and she listened. The facility was large. She could hear the building before she could feel it, the way large industrial structures displace ambient sound. the acoustic shadow they cast on the surrounding space. Loading docks on the east face, she thought, from the updraft of a large, empty internal volume. Personnel near the south entrance, 2, maybe 3, cigarette smoke drifting on the east wind. A vehicle idling somewhere around the north side, diesel, low power, the kind of idle you maintained when you expected to need to move quickly. She moved along the fence line. She counted her steps, 30 to the southeast corner. Then along the south face, the personnel near the entrance didn't move, which meant they weren't patrolling, which meant they were posted. Posted guards watched outward. She moved close to the building itself, inside their outward angle. A service door. She found it by the seal of cold air at the base. It was unlocked. That told her they were not worried about entry. They were worried about exit, which meant Moreau was inside, alive, and they were confident he had no way out. She opened the door. The interior was enormous and cold. High ceiling. She could hear it, a vast empty resonance above her head, 15, 20 feet minimum. Concrete floor. Heavy machinery somewhere in the mid-distance. Dormant. The smell of hydraulic fluid and steel. And voices. She moved toward them. She counted pillars by sound. The way each step echoed off structural columns let her triangulate her position relative to the walls. She moved between 2 rows of what felt like shipping containers, based on the way the acoustics collapsed on either side of her, creating a narrow channel. The voices resolved. 2 of them, then a third, then Moreau's. She stopped. His voice was wrong. Not the controlled weapon quiet she'd come to read as his default. This was something stripped of the control. Still low, still deliberate, but underneath it was something that had been at this for over an hour and was running low on the resource that made the control possible. She moved closer along the container wall, and then a voice she recognized only from the sound of people's reactions to it. Ricci. She had never heard Gabriel Ricci speak before. She had heard Moreau say his name, heard Casimir say it, heard the quality of silence that followed it in rooms full of armed men. Now she heard the voice itself. It was not what she expected. It was pleasant. That was the thing. A smooth, even tenor with a thoughtful quality to it, the voice of a man who enjoyed the sound of his own reasoning. "You spent 9 years building something I built in 4, Ricci said. I don't say that to be cruel. I say it because you should understand the fundamental difference between us. You operate from anger, Lucien. Everything you built because of what happened in New Orleans. And anger is an excellent fuel, but it burns dirty. I operate from clarity." Moreau said something she couldn't catch. "I know," Ricci said. "I know about the girl. Adrian told me, yes, tonight, after he confirmed she was who you thought she was." A pause. "That's unfortunate timing for you. I genuinely mean that. To find the thing you've been looking for and lose it the same night." Her hand found the wall of the container. "She's not lost," Moreau said. "She's in a penthouse with Adrian and 12 armed men and no way out and no reason to trust anyone, least of all you," Ricci said. "She has the archive in her head. She doesn't know us. She doesn't owe you anything. What do you think she does when Adrian sits down in front of her and offers her money and a life?" "She doesn't take it," Moreau said. "You've known her for 3 hours." "I've known her for 15 years, Moreau said. A silence. "Sentimental," Ricci said, not mockingly, almost sadly. "Tell me what you want," Moreau said. "I want what everyone wants, the archive, the key, the 15 years of financial and political records that your accountant, your late brilliant, treacherous accountant, spent his career encoding and his last year hiding." A pause. "I want the girl to play me a song, essentially. And if she won't, then I'll have a conversation with the people who matter to her, which, based on available evidence, appears to be..." Ricci stopped. Eleanor heard footsteps, heading in her direction. She pressed flat against the container wall. The footsteps were a single pair, unhurried, a patrol pattern. She tracked their approach, counted their cadence, gauged the sight angle. The guard was walking along the near side of the containers, which meant he would pass within 4 feet of her position. She did not breathe. He passed. She let him get 8 steps beyond her. Then she moved. She found Moreau by his voice, positioned him at approximately 60 feet north-northeast, in an open space between the container rows and the north wall. She moved through the container channel, counting, mapping, building the space around her in real time. She stopped at the edge of the channel. Open space ahead. She could feel it. The sudden expansion of acoustic range, the sound returning from the far wall, the way the cold air moved differently without the containers to contain it. Ricci was perhaps 30 feet ahead and left. 2 guards close to him. 2 more further, one of them the patrol who'd passed her. Moreau. She placed him center, closer than Ricci, slightly elevated. A chair, maybe. They'd put him in a chair. She heard his breathing. She heard him hear her. She knew he heard her because his breathing changed. Microscopic change. The specific quality of someone who has been existing entirely inside their own declining options and has just perceived something in the external environment that doesn't fit the established pattern. She could not tell him not to react. She could not signal him. She could only trust that he was, whatever else he was, exceptional at managing his own face and body in conditions that demanded it. His breathing returned to its previous pattern. 1 second. 2. Ricci was still talking. He talked the way powerful men talked when they had complete situational control. Not to communicate information, but to demonstrate their comfort with the silence they were filling. Eleanor reached into her satchel. Her fingers found the miniature keyboard synthesizer, 8 inches long. It ran on battery power. She had used it in recording sessions to check her compositions without access to a full instrument, playing silently through headphones or through its single small speaker. She turned the speaker on. She found middle C. She played 4 bars. Not the symphony. Something else entirely. A jazz interval pattern she'd been working on for 3 weeks. A voicing she'd developed from an old monk standard. The specific syncopated left-hand rhythm that she had never played for anyone because she played it when she was alone and thinking. Moreau would not know it. But Moreau would know it wasn't the symphony. And Moreau would know she was here. The sound was small and thin in the enormous space. The synthesizer's single speaker producing something that lasted maybe 2 seconds before she silenced it. But sound travels. In a large enclosed industrial space with hard walls and a high ceiling, sound travels considerably. Ricci stopped talking. "What was that?" he said. "Footsteps. Multiple. Searching." "Check the south side," Ricci said. 3 guards moving south. Away from her position, which left Ricci with 1 guard close and Moreau in the chair, and a patrol somewhere behind her, and Eleanor at the edge of the container channel with a gun she had never fired, and a blade in her cane and an acoustic map of the space that was updated every second by the movement of everyone in it. She heard Moreau. Not his voice. His chair. A specific creak. Weight shifting. Transferring. A person who has been sitting still for a long time making a decision to stop sitting still. She heard the chain or restraint, some kind of link, metal on metal, go taut, then go silent. She heard Moreau breathe in, and Eleanor came out of the container channel at a run, low and fast, her cane in her left hand and the gun in her right, and her entire map of the space projecting in front of her like a blueprint. She could see more clearly than anything she had ever looked at with her eyes open. And she aimed for where she had last heard Ricci's guards breathing and fired twice, and the muzzle flash lit up the inside of her closed eyelids like white and total and gone. The first shot hit the guard in the shoulder. She knew because the sound of the impact was wrong for center mass. Too high, too lateral. The man's grunt had the specific pitch of a shoulder wound rather than a torso wound, and he went sideways rather than down. The second shot, she didn't know where it went because she was already moving. She heard Moreau. Heard him come out of the chair. The chain snapping was not a chain snapping, she understood now. It was a zip tie giving way. He'd been working it the entire time she'd been navigating the building, and the moment she'd fired and given him the chaos he needed, he came up with everything he had left. The guard close to Ricci reacted to her, not to Moreau. That was the mistake. She heard Moreau cross 15 feet in under 2 seconds and heard the collision. His full weight into the guard's body, the sound of it dense and ugly. The guard's weapon discharging into the concrete floor, a muzzle flash she felt as pressure on the air. Then the sound of Moreau doing something quick and final with his elbow that she didn't need to categorize to understand. Silence. 3 seconds of it. then the South Side patrol running back toward them. "How many?" she said. "3 coming from the south." Moreau's voice was raw. "2 outside the north door. Ricci." He was breathing in hard pulls. He ran. "Which direction?" "West. There's a secondary office on the west wall." She was already turning. "Eleanor, how many rounds do you have?" she said. A pause. The sound of him taking the weapon off the downed guard. 14, plus whatever you have left." 2 shots fired, 14 in the magazine." "Okay." "The 3 from the south," she said. Can you handle 3?" "Yes." Then handle 3." She didn't wait for his response. She moved west, staying close to the container wall, her cane compressed and held in her left hand as a short, rigid weapon rather than a navigation tool, using her footsteps on the concrete to map the space. The sound returned off a wall ahead of her, closer than she expected, and she adjusted, found the wall with her palm, and slid along it. She heard Moreau behind her engage the patrol. The sound was brief and violent, and she did not turn around. The west wall had a door. She found it by the line of warmer air along its seam. The office on the other side was heated, and heat moved through gaps. She pressed against the wall to the right of the door and listened. Ricci was inside. She could hear him on a phone, voice tight, the careful composure cracking at the edges. A man used to being the one who arranged problems for others, now dealing with a problem he had not arranged. One other person in the room with him. Breathing pattern close to the door, which meant a guard posted inside. Close quarters. Maybe 10 feet of office depth. She thought about what she had. She thought about what she didn't have. She had 2 rounds. She had a blade. She had a room she had never been in with a man she had never met and a guard in the fatal position between her and the man. She thought about what Ricci had said to Moreau. "She doesn't owe you anything." He was right. She didn't, but she owed herself something. She had been owed it since she was 10 years old, and a storm took everything that made the world make sense. And her father had put a pendant around her neck that was never hers, and a symphony in her hands that was never only music in a life in which every room was dark, and she had navigated every single one of them alone. She was done navigating alone. She opened the door. The guard was exactly where she'd placed him. She felt his presence before she was fully through the door, and she dropped her shoulder and drove into him low, the way her father had showed her against a basement wall in New Orleans when she was 10 years old. And she hadn't understood why a music teacher knew how to do that, but she understood now. She understood everything now. And the guard went back into a metal shelving unit, and the crash of it was enormous in the small space. She came up with the gun leveled at where Ricci's voice had been coming from. "Stop," she said. Silence. The guard on the floor was not unconscious, but he was tangled in shelving, and she heard him trying to sort himself out of it. And she said, without moving the gun's orientation, "If you stand up, I will shoot in your direction, and I will not miss twice." And he stopped moving. "Eleanor Vale," Ricci said. He was 6 feet ahead of her and slightly right. The phone had disconnected, or he had ended the call. His voice in person was exactly as it had been when she'd heard it from the container channel. Pleasant, even, with the unhurried quality of a man who had been in difficult rooms before. But she could hear something else underneath it now. The cellular thing that voices did when the body they belonged to was genuinely afraid. He was managing it extremely well. But she heard it. "You drove here alone," he said. "Yes." "From the north side." "Yes." "That's," he said, and stopped. "That's remarkable." "I need you to put the gun down," she said. "I don't have a gun," he said. "I'm not a man who carries a gun. I have people for that." "Then I need you to put your hands where I can hear them." A pause. Then the sound of his palms pressing flat on what sounded like a desk surface. "Your father," he said, "was the single most gifted financial architect I have ever encountered. I mean that without reservation. What he built was genuinely beautiful. The elegance of it. 17 jurisdictions, no detectable signature, moving volumes that would have destabilized mid-sized economies if they'd moved through conventional channels." A pause. "I was devastated when he chose to destroy it." "He didn't destroy it," she said. "He preserved it." Semantics. Not really. He preserved every record of every transaction, every name, every payoff, every contract, everything your organization and 6 others did for 16 years. She kept the gun level. He put it somewhere no one would think to look. Inside his blind daughter's memory, Ricci said. Inside his daughter's memory, she said. A silence. So here we are, Ricci said. Here we are. You understand, he said, that what you're carrying makes you the single most dangerous and most endangered person in the country. There is no version of tonight where you walk away from this and live quietly. You're carrying the end of a great number of very powerful people's careers and freedom. They will not let that walk around indefinitely. I know, she said. Then what exactly is your plan, Eleanor? She heard the door behind her open. She turned her head a degree without moving the gun. Moreau's footsteps. She knew them. He came into the room and stopped just inside the door, and she heard him take in the configuration. Her with the gun, Ricci at the desk, the guard still on the floor sorting himself out of the shelving. And she heard him decide not to change what she was doing. He trusted her to be doing it right. She turned back to Ricci. Here's what happens, she said. The archive gets transmitted to 6 journalists across 4 countries tonight. Not the full record, specific sections. Enough to begin investigations that cannot be stopped. Enough to pull threads. She paused. The rest stays with me, as insurance. As long as no one touches me or anyone connected to me, the rest stays exactly where it is. The moment anything happens to me, an automated system my father built delivers the complete archive to every major news organization and law enforcement agency in the country simultaneously. She had not told Moreau this. She had not told anyone this. She had figured it out in the car on the way here, driving by sound through flooded Chicago streets, putting together the pieces of what she knew about her father against the pieces of what Casimir had told her, and this was the architecture she'd assembled. Whether the automated system existed was another question. Whether Ricci knew that was the question she needed to answer. The silence held for 5 seconds. Your father built that, Ricci said, before he died. Yes. And you have access to trigger it, or not trigger it, she said, depending. 7 seconds of silence. She heard Ricci breathe in slowly through his nose, heard him hold it, heard him make a decision the way people made decisions, not in a single moment, but in the accumulation of small interior movements that eventually tipped in one direction. The guard on the floor, Ricci said. Let him leave. No. Eleanor? He stays until we're done, she said. Then he leaves. We all leave. She paused. No one dies tonight unless someone makes that necessary. Moreau shifted his weight behind her. She understood why. This was not how Lucien Moreau had envisioned this ending. This was not consistent with the version of tonight that he had been building toward for months, possibly years. He had come to the harbor to end Gabriel Ricci, and she was standing in front of him offering a negotiated exit. She understood why it was wrong for him. She did it anyway. Because Ricci was right about one thing. There was no version of a bloodbath tonight that left her standing outside it. If Moreau killed Ricci in this room, she became the singular inheritor of a war that would run for years, hunted by every organization that wanted the archive and everyone that feared it. The only exit was one where the threat was restructured rather than eliminated, where she became too costly to attack and too dangerous to ignore. Her father had built her to be a weapon. She was choosing what to aim it at. We have an understanding, Ricci said. It was not a question. It was a man who had been doing business for decades recognizing the shape of a deal. We have a temporary arrangement, she said, based entirely on mutual self-interest. Don't mistake it for trust. I don't make that mistake, he said. Good. She kept the gun level until she heard Ricci move from behind the desk, heard him cross toward the door, heard him pause there. Your father, he said, would have been proud of you. Whatever else he was, he loved you completely. That was always clear. A pause. It was also ultimately why he did what he did, in case you wondered. She said nothing. His footsteps went through the door and away. She stood in the office with the gun lowering slowly and the guard on the floor, and Moreau 3 feet behind her, and the cold of the industrial space pressing in through the open door, and the whole accumulated weight of the night coming down on her at once. Not dramatically, not in a wave, but in the specific quiet way exhaustion arrived. Incrementally, settling into the muscles and the bones like water into dry ground. She found the wall with her free hand and leaned on it. The guard said from the floor, "Can I go?" "Yes," she said. He went. She and Moreau were alone in the office. He didn't say anything for a long time. She could hear him. The labor in his breathing. The old wound from the blackthorn had been managed but not resolved, and whatever he'd done to the patrol guards had cost him. He was standing on will at this point, which she recognized because she was doing the same thing. "The automated system," he said. "Does it exist? Does it matter?" "To my ability to sleep, yes." She almost laughed. "Not quite. I'll tell you someday." "Eleanor." "Someday," she said. He was quiet for another moment. "You could have let me end it," he said. "I know. It would have been cleaner." "Cleaner for tonight," she said. "Not for the next 10 years. She pushed off the wall and found her cane on the floor and picked it up. "You want to burn it down. I understand that. But burning it down means the fire comes back to us. This way. Ricci knows the cost of moving against us. The journalists I contact know enough to start pulling threads. The people in that archive know that I exist and that I'm watching. It's not justice, but it's a structure. You decided all of that on the drive here." "I had 17 minutes. He made the sound that wasn't quite a laugh. She heard it differently this time, sashimi, less involuntary, more something he'd allowed. A small, deliberate surrender to the absurdity of the specific night they had both survived. "Come on," he said. "I need to sit down before I fall down." The drive back was Moreau at the wheel and Eleanor in the passenger seat, with her head leaning against the cold glass of the window. Neither of them spoke for the first 10 minutes. The city moved past. She could feel it through the glass, the specific rhythm of Chicago's overnight geography, the way the road changed through different neighborhoods, the distant sound of the lake receding and then returning as the route curved north. "In New Orleans," she said. "You asked me why I stayed." "You were 10, he said. "You said you weren't afraid." "I was terrified," she said. "I just didn't know how to leave." "That's not the same thing as what you said." "No," she agreed. "It isn't." Another mile of silence. "My father," she said, "before the accident. Did you ever have any contact with him?" "No," Moreau said. "I knew his work, not him." "He was kind," she said. "That's what I keep coming back to. He was genuinely kind. He made pancakes on Sunday mornings, and he always burned the second batch because he got distracted talking to me and forgot about the pan. He taught me chess even though I couldn't see the board because he said the game was never about the board anyway." She paused. "He was also building an infrastructure of corruption for a decade and a half, and somewhere in his head, those two things coexisted without apparent conflict. People are mostly that," Moreau said. "Contradictions that have learned to walk around." "Is that you?" A pause. "I've killed people," he said. "Not incidentally, deliberately. I've ordered things that cannot be made right." A long pause. "I make very good eggs. I listen to jazz at 3 in the morning when I can't sleep. I have kept a photograph of a basement wall in New Orleans for 15 years because it was the last place I felt something close to safe." He stopped. "I don't know what that makes me." "Human," she said. "Is that sufficient?" "I don't know yet," she said. He said nothing. She listened to the city. They returned to the penthouse at 3:40 in the morning. Casimir met them at the elevator. She heard him exhale when Moreau's footsteps came through the door, a single compressed breath that contained more relief than he would have wanted visible. "Adrian," Moreau said. "Secured," Casimir said. "Mara has been released and has chosen to resign, which I think is the wisest decision anyone has made tonight. The young one has a head injury that is not serious and will require explanation to someone medical." A pause. "There is also a significant amount of broken glass in the wine storage that I feel obligated to mention." "The bottle," Moreau said. "It was a 2004 Bordeaux," Casimir said. "I regret it." "What did you do with Adrian?" A pause. "He is in the north bedroom, restrained, waiting for your decision." Moreau walked toward the north corridor. Eleanor heard him stop. "Adrian has been with me 9 years," he said. "Not to anyone in particular. to the air. Casimir said nothing. I gave him everything, Moreau said. Everything I knew about running this. Every contact, every account, every protocol. He stopped again. I should have seen it. You trusted him, Casimir said. That is not the same as failing to see. It feels the same. Yes, Casimir said. It always does. Eleanor sat on the couch in the living area and listened to Moreau's footsteps go down the north corridor. She heard the bedroom door open. She heard two voices, one Moreau's, one Adrian's, both too low to decode, the conversation running for maybe 12 minutes. Then silence. Then Moreau returning. She didn't ask. He sat in the chair across from her, and she heard him drop his head back against it. He goes to the federal contact in Milwaukee, Moreau said. With a full accounting. He'll serve time, not enough, but time. A pause. I'm not in a position to deliver justice cleanly. Nobody is, she said. Silence settled over the room. Not the pressurized silence of the Blackthorn lobby 8 hours ago. Something different. The silence of people who have run out of crisis and haven't yet figured out what lives on the other side of it. The journalists, Moreau said. You were serious. Yes. Which sections? The political payoffs, she said. Judges. 3 specific congressional relationships. The infrastructure is already compromised the moment those threads start pulling. The financial architecture starts unraveling on its own. She paused. Not your specific operations. Not yet. Not yet, he said. You said you were dismantling the old bloodlines, she said. If that's true, the financial records become historical rather than operational in time. If it's not true, it's true, he said. Then we have time to do it correctly. And the rest, he said. What you carry. She pressed her thumb against the pendant. It stays with me, she said. It doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't get played for anyone. It exists as a deterrent. She paused. My father spent the last year of his life deciding what to do with what he'd built. I think this is what he chose. Not destruction, not exposure, leverage. A reason for certain people to behave differently than they would have otherwise. That's a considerable weight, Moreau said. I know. You didn't choose it. Neither did you choose New Orleans, she said. A long quiet. No, he said. I didn't. She found the edge of the couch cushion with her palm and pressed against it. She was more tired than she had words for. The kind of tired that went all the way down, past the body, into whatever was underneath the body. I need to sleep, she said. Yes. And tomorrow I need to make some calls, and I need my own phone, which is in my apartment on Diversey, and I need to eat something that isn't... She stopped. Has anyone eaten anything tonight? No, Casimir said from somewhere across the room. She'd forgotten he was still there. However, I can make eggs. She turned her head toward him. You cook, she said. I cook many things, Casimir said. I am 71 years old and I live alone. One develops skills. She heard Moreau make a sound, not the almost laugh, the real one. Brief and unguarded, the sound of something genuinely surprised out of him, and she thought that was probably the most human thing she'd heard from him all night, and also probably a sound that very few people ever heard at all. I'll make eggs, Casimir said, and moved toward the kitchen. 3 weeks later, Eleanor moved the last of her things out of the Diversey apartment on a Tuesday afternoon in a thin, pale October light that she couldn't see but could feel on her face through the cab window. She didn't take much. Sheet music, the keyboard synthesizer, 4 changes of clothes and her good winter coat, and a collection of audiobooks on a portable drive, and the picture she kept on her nightstand. Her father at the piano, age 40, laughing at something off camera, one hand still on the keys. She couldn't see the picture, but she knew every detail of it because she'd had Donna Chen describe it to her years ago, and she'd memorized the description the way she memorized everything. She took the pendant off once, the night before she left, held it in her palm. Clara Devane, a 19-year-old woman who had been peripherally connected to something terrible and had survived it and had given a pendant to a man who had given it to another man who had put it around his daughter's neck in a hospital room while she was learning what permanent dark felt like. She didn't know what that chain of hands meant. She suspected she never would entirely. But she put the pendant back on because it was hers now, regardless of how it had gotten to her. Worn smooth by her own hands over 15 years, and the things that belonged to you by use were sometimes more real than the things that belonged to you by right. The theater was on the north lakefront. 3 stories, converted from a performance venue that had sat empty for 4 years. The rehearsal space on the first floor had a Bösendorfer that she discovered within the first 20 minutes of being inside the building and spent the subsequent hour playing with the focus of someone who had been away from a serious instrument for longer than they'd realized. Moreau had the building. He gave it to no one. He gave it to her. She had not thanked him in a way he found satisfying, and she had no plans to start. He came on Thursday evenings, usually. Sometimes stayed past midnight, sometimes left at 9. He sat in the chair by the east window while she played, and he did not speak during the music, which she had required explicitly on the first Thursday, and which he had honored without complaint every Thursday since. Afterwards they talked. Not about the archive, not about the business of whatever he was still dismantling or rebuilding or deciding about, but about ordinary things in the way that people talked about ordinary things when they were learning how to be ordinary with each other, which was harder than anything else they had done. He told her about New Orleans, the real version, not the version he'd given her in the car on the night they met, the full version, the one that had cost him something to hold for 15 years. He gave it to her in pieces over several weeks, a few minutes at a time, and she listened without interrupting because she had learned that some things needed to be given that way. She told him about the accident, the Dan Ryan, the sound of her father's voice going quiet, and the silence after that was different from all previous silences, and the weeks in the hospital learning to build a new version of the world from sound alone, and how she had been furious for years in a specific sustained way that had no exit, and how she had eventually turned that fury into something useful because she did not know what else to do with it. He listened the same way she did. Casimir came by on Sundays, usually with food he'd cooked in containers he expected to get back, and the 3 of them ate in the rehearsal space and talked about things that had nothing to do with any of it. Casimir had opinions about jazz that were completely incorrect and defended them with an enthusiasm she found inexplicably comforting. He also, she discovered, played chess. They played without a board. He called the pieces. She remembered them. He won the first 2 games and she won the third, and he accused her of counting moves in musical notation, which she was, and she refused to apologize for it. The federal investigation that started from the journalist's initial reporting ran for months. She watched it the way she watched everything she couldn't see, through sound, through texture, through the small tremors that moved through the information she received about it. Certain names appeared in coverage. Certain investigations opened. Certain people who had been untouchable for 20 years began experiencing the specific gravity of accountability, slowly, imperfectly, incompletely, the way accountability always moved. It was not justice. She had stopped expecting justice somewhere around the 3rd Thursday. What she had was this: a building by the lake that smelled of old wood and cold air and the particular resonance of a room built for sound. A Bösendorfer that answered every note she gave it. A Thursday evening and a Sunday afternoon, and the knowledge that the thing she carried was being carried carefully, with intention, aimed at something her father had believed was worth aiming at. She still played the symphony, not for anyone, not as a transmission. She played it because it was her father's, and it was hers, and it was the most complete thing she had. A map of a man's interior life encoded in music, which was also a map of an empire's crimes, which was also, somehow, both things at once without either one canceling the other out. Because that was what her father had been, and she had decided she could hold both. She played it on a Friday night in November when the lake outside was making its cold, late autumn sound against the breakwater, and the building was empty except for her. She played it from the first note to the last, all the way through for the first time in 11 years, the way it was meant to be played, without stopping. When it ended, she sat in the silence with her hands resting on the keys. Outside, rain began. Soft rain, the kind that didn't have a grudge, the kind that just fell because that was what rain did, because the sky had gathered what it could hold and then let it go. She had spent 15 years inside a dark that had been given to her by other people's choices, her father's choices, a stranger's pendant, a storm in New Orleans, a guardrail on the Dan Ryan at 11 at night when the road was wet and something had gone wrong that she would never fully know. She had mapped that dark so thoroughly, she no longer feared it. She thought about what Moreau had said to her once, on a Thursday in late October, quietly and without expecting a response. That he had spent 15 years trying to find someone who understood the specific quality of surviving something that was supposed to kill you. She had not given him a response that night, but she played the first 4 bars of the symphony from memory, slowly, in the low register, and let them hang in the air between them, and he had heard what she meant. She pressed the sustain pedal down and played one last chord and held it, let it fill the theater, let it move through the old walls and the cold air, and spread out toward the lake beyond the windows she couldn't see. The chord faded, the rain continued. She sat in it, in the dark that was hers, in the quiet that she had earned, and she breathed, and she did not need the storm to be over to know that she had survived it. She had always survived it. She just hadn't known, until now, who she had survived it with.